There is something happening inside her right now, and you will never hear her say it out loud. She won't mention it in conversation. She won't text you about it at midnight. She won't bring it up the next time you see each other. But it is there, running underneath everything, quiet and persistent and more powerful than most men ever realize. And the reason you haven't noticed it is not because you aren't paying attention. It's because you have been trained by every piece of advice you've ever received about women to look for the wrong signals entirely. You have been watching her face when you should have been watching the space between you. You have been listening to her words when the most important information was living in her silence. There is a specific thing a woman feels when a man she has not been valuing suddenly stops reaching for her approval. It is not what you would expect. It is not relief. It is not indifference. It is something far more unsettling than either of those for her. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly what that feeling is, what causes it, and why the answer has almost certainly been playing out in your own life without you ever recognizing it for what it was. That question, what actually hurts her most when she doesn't value you, is what we are going to answer together today. She wasn't ignoring you because you didn't matter. She was ignoring you because somewhere underneath everything she assumed you always would be there. This is where most explanations of female behavior get it fundamentally wrong. They frame a woman's indifference as a verdict. They treat her casual treatment of a man as a complete statement. She decided, she dismissed, case closed. But that framing misses something important about how the female psychological system actually works. Women do not process male attention as a finite resource that they consciously manage. They process it the way most people process something they take for granted, the way you process clean air or running water or the reliable arrival of morning. You do not think about it. You do not appreciate it in real time. You simply absorb it as part of the backdrop of your world, and you build around it without ever acknowledging the foundation. Psychologists who study social bonding have documented something called ambient security, the background sense of stability that consistent attention from another person quietly creates. It does not register as something meaningful while it is present. It registers only as a kind of low hum in the background of daily life. But the moment that hum disappears, something shifts in a way that is disproportionate to the conscious value the person ever assigned to it. This is what she has been doing with your attention, not deliberately, not calculating, simply absorbing it into her sense of how the world works around her, the way you absorb the weight of your own body without noticing it until it changes. Think back to a conversation that once seemed ordinary, one where you walked away without realizing what had actually just happened. You were present, you were engaged, you were, in ways you probably didn't name at the time, offering her something real, and she received it the way people receive things they expect to keep receiving, without ceremony, without acknowledgement, without gratitude, not because she was cruel, because you had become part of the furniture of her world, and furniture, until it disappears, goes completely unseen. The ledger isn't something she maintains consciously, but it exists, and your presence in it was far more significant than she ever told you. What she loses isn't you exactly. What she loses is who she believed she was while you were watching. This is the part that surprises most men when they first understand it, because the instinct is to assume that what a woman misses when a man withdraws is the man himself, his personality, his humor, his company. And sometimes that is true. But in situations where she was not actively valuing him, where she was present but not particularly invested, something different happens. What she loses is not her connection to him. What she loses is a specific feeling about herself. There is a consistent pattern in how women describe the internal experience of losing attention they had grown accustomed to. They rarely describe missing the person directly. They describe feeling somehow less vivid, less interesting, less certain of something they had not realized they were certain of. This is because a significant portion of how women experience their own desirability is relational. It exists in the presence of someone choosing to direct his attention toward them. When that choosing is active and consistent, she absorbs it as evidence of something about her. She is someone who gets noticed. She is someone worth pursuing. She is someone who holds space in another person's mind. None of this is necessarily romantic on her end. It does not require her to be interested in him. It does not require her to be thinking about him deliberately. It simply requires his attention to be available as a quiet, ongoing confirmation of something she likes believing about herself. When that attention disappears, the confirmation disappears with it. And what she is left with is a version of herself that feels unexpectedly quieter than before. Not dramatically, not in a way she will necessarily identify accurately, but the absence is felt. It registers in the body before it registers in the mind, and that is when the unsettled feeling begins. Of course, context matters here. Women who have strong internal sources of self-worth will feel this less acutely than women whose confidence is more externally anchored. But even in the former case, the shift registers. Human beings are social animals. We are all, to varying degrees, affected by the gaze of others. The difference is only in how conscious we are of it. Most men interpret her silence as confirmation. They're wrong, and the timing of that mistake costs them everything. Here is something that almost no one explains clearly, and it is the reason so many men abandon a situation right at the moment it was about to change. When a man pulls back, when he stops initiating, stops adjusting his behavior around her, stops offering his attention as something available and reliable, she does not immediately feel the shift. There is a delay, and that delay is not a sign that nothing is happening. It is a sign that the process has begun. Think about a sound you have been living with for so long it has become invisible. The hum of an air conditioner, the distant noise of traffic outside your window. You stop hearing it, it becomes part of the silence. But the moment it switches off, something happens in the room. The quality of the quiet changes, and it takes a moment, sometimes more than a moment, before your brain registers that something is gone. Her emotional system works on a similar principle. She has been experiencing your attention as background. The withdrawal of that background does not land instantly. Her mind needs time to notice the absence, to realize that what once was there consistently is no longer arriving. And this process can take days, sometimes weeks, depending on how long the pattern was established and how saturated her life is with other stimulation. You might be thinking, couldn't this just mean she simply doesn't care? And sometimes, yes, the silence is exactly what it appears to be. But here is the detail that separates genuine indifference from the delay. Genuine indifference does not eventually produce any reaction. The delay always does. Not loudly, not dramatically, but always. The mistake most men make is that they pull back, wait 2 or 3 days, see no visible reaction, and interpret that as their answer. They walk back in, they resume pursuing, and they do it right as the delay was ending, right as the absence was beginning to register in her. This is the single most common error in this entire dynamic, and it is the one that resets the cycle every time. It's not heartbreak. It's not longing exactly. It's something quieter and more uncomfortable than either of those, and she doesn't have a clean word for it. Let me try to describe what she is actually experiencing in this moment, because the closer you can understand this, the more clearly you will be able to read what is happening around you. When the delay ends and the absence fully registers, what she feels is not grief. It is not the ache of missing someone she loved. It is something more compound than that, and in some ways more difficult to sit with. Part of it is a restlessness she cannot entirely explain, a sense that something she was not paying attention to is no longer available. And now that it is gone, she finds herself thinking about it in ways she never did when it was present. This is what psychologists call reactance, the human tendency to want something more urgently once its availability has been removed or threatened. She was not particularly moved by your presence, but its absence is producing a pull she did not anticipate and cannot fully account for. Part of it is something closer to ego discomfort. There is a gap opening up between how she treated you and what she may have actually walked away from. That gap is uncomfortable to look at directly. It raises a question she would rather not answer. Did I underestimate that? Was I wrong about what was there? Women, like all people, prefer their judgments to be correct. The feeling that a quiet judgment may have been mistaken is unsettling in a specific personal way. And part of it, and this is the part she will never name to you, possibly never name to herself, is a retroactive curiosity, a wondering about you that feels strange because it is arriving late after the fact, in a context where she had already filed you into a mental category and moved on. She is not suddenly falling for you, but she is, for the first time, actually seeing you, seeing who you might have been in a different version of how she'd handled things. Remember what I told you at the beginning, that there was something specific happening inside her that you would never hear her say out loud. We are reaching it now. Because this compound feeling, the restlessness, the ego discomfort, the retroactive curiosity, is what everything else in this video has been building toward, and it has a specific trigger. More than one, actually. The shift she feels isn't caused by what you do to get her attention. It's caused by what you stop doing to keep it. There are three specific behavioral changes that trigger this internal shift in a woman, and they are not tactics. I want to be careful about how I describe these because there is a version of this conversation that turns into a manipulation playbook, and that is not what this is. These are the natural consequences of a man who has genuinely re-centered himself. They work because they are real. Performed versions of them are always identifiable, and they produce a different, lesser response. The first is a man redirecting his social and creative energy visibly outward into his own life, not withdrawing into isolation. That reads as sulking, but actively investing in his friendships, his interests, his ambitions in ways that are visible and genuine. When a woman observes this, not because he is performing it for her, but because it is actually happening, it disrupts the assumption that his world revolved around her orbit. His world, it turns out, is larger than she accounted for, and that revision is significant. The second trigger is warmth without urgency. When he does interact with her, he is present, he is kind, he is genuinely warm, but there is no undercurrent of need in it, no checking to see if it landed, no adjustment in response to her energy. He is simply there, pleasantly, and then he is not. The absence of urgency reads as abundance. Abundance reads as value, and value, when she had not been assigning it, creates a subtle recalibration. The third trigger, and this is the one that has the most immediate impact, is a man who stops adjusting his behavior in response to her mood. For most men in this dynamic, there has been an unconscious pattern of calibration. He would read her energy, assess her interest level, and adjust accordingly, being more engaged when she was warm, pulling back when she was cool, always modulating himself in response to her signals. When that calibration stops, when he simply behaves consistently regardless of whether she is giving him warmth or distance, it removes from her a specific kind of power she may not have known she was using, and its removal is felt immediately. Of the three triggers, two are things most men eventually discover on their own through experience. But there is a third layer beneath all of this, something more specific, more overlooked, and consistently the one that lands the deepest. And it is what comes next. Of all the things that can shift something in her, this is the one she will never tell you about because admitting it would require admitting something about herself. The most powerful trigger is not his absence. It is not his warmth. It is not even his consistency. The most powerful trigger is a man who becomes genuinely interested in his own life in a way that has nothing to do with her, not performatively, not as a strategy. Authentically. This seems simple when stated directly, but it is worth sitting with because it is more specific than it sounds. There is a version of going back to your own life that men do as a response to rejection, and she can feel the difference immediately. It has a quality of protest to it. It is doing things to be seen doing them, even when no one is watching. And it doesn't produce this particular effect because it is not real. It is still organized around her, just in a negative direction. What produces the deepest shift is something different. It is the genuine discovery or rediscovery of what he actually cares about when she is not part of the equation. His work, his relationships with people who matter to him, a project that absorbs him completely, a version of his daily life that is full and satisfying not because he is distracting himself from her absence, but because it genuinely is full and satisfying on its own terms. When she observes this, and she will observe it because women are extraordinarily attuned to authenticity in male behavior, something specific happens inside her. She realizes quietly and without ceremony that she is no longer at the center of his internal world, not at the edge of it either, waiting for re-entry, simply not the organizing principle anymore. And this confronts her with a question she was not expecting. Not, does he still like me? That question she could manage. The question this produces is harder than that. It is, was I wrong about what I was to him, and does that mean I was wrong about what he was to me? This is the question she cannot name cleanly. This is the source of the restlessness and the retroactive curiosity and the quiet ego discomfort, because to answer it honestly would require her to look at how she treated a man who, it turns out, had a whole world she never took seriously, a man who, now that she can see it clearly, was not actually waiting for her at all. He was simply, for a time, choosing her, and at some point without drama, he stopped. That is the moment she feels most, not when he pulled back, not when he stopped texting first. The moment she feels most is the moment she realizes he is fine, genuinely, quietly, completely fine, and his world did not collapse when she stepped back from it. It simply continued, without her in it, without any visible evidence that the absence had cost him anything at all. That is what hurts most. Not cruelty, not rejection, just the quiet, unmistakable fact of a man who found his way back to himself and did not need her permission to do it. Everything in this video has been building toward one coherent truth, and it is this. What hurts a woman most when she doesn't value you is not your absence. It is your fullness. It is the discovery that you were carrying a life of genuine richness and substance the whole time, and that the life continues and even expands once you stop offering it to someone who wasn't meeting it with equal care. The ledger she was keeping without knowing it, all that unconscious tracking of your attention as a background resource, that ledger goes hollow the moment she realizes she cannot make new entries in it. The self-image that your attention was quietly sustaining loses its quiet sustenance. The assumption that your world orbited hers gets replaced by evidence that it never truly did. And none of this requires a scene. None of it requires confrontation or explanation. It simply requires you to stop performing your availability for someone who wasn't valuing the performance. You now understand something most men spend years trying to figure out through trial and error. You understand where the real weight lives in this dynamic. Not in the dramatic moments, not in the arguments, but in the quiet, ongoing reality of a man who genuinely inhabits his own life. That understanding does not require you to become strategic or calculated. It requires you to become real, to ask yourself honestly where your energy is actually going and whether the place it is going is deserving of it. You do not need to overanalyze every interaction from this point forward. You do not need to start keeping your own ledger, counting moments, measuring responses. What you need is simply to take yourself seriously, to build a life that is full enough that its fullness is obvious, not as a signal to send, but as the natural result of living with intention. Have you ever pulled back from a woman, not as a strategy, just because you finally stopped waiting and noticed something change in how she treated you? Tell me what that looked like in the comments. I read every one of them, and you might be describing an experience that helps someone else understand what happened in their own life. If this kind of conversation is useful to you, the kind that goes beneath the surface and actually explains the psychology behind what you experience, then this channel is where that lives. Every video here is built around the same principle, understanding what is actually happening, not just what appears to be happening. In the next video, I'm going to show you the specific small behaviors women use when they're quietly trying to find their way back into a man's attention. Because once you can read those signals accurately, you'll never misinterpret her again.